So hello everyone, welcome to this week's YouTube tutorial, and this week I'm going to be answering a question that came in specifically from one of the TDW Plus subscribers. And if you don't know what that is, we have a subscription plan to where you can access more material and ask questions directly of TDW. But this one I thought is a great question that we could use on YouTube, and we could look at it together. So we're going to look at this particular question on data reuse in S1000D, which is kind of one of those common myths that we're going to try and debunk and look at how that works today. And I'm going to do my best to get it under 20 minutes. And the those of you who are sending in your comments and you're basically, praising us for what we're doing here, thank you very much. And I know some of you have said that I'm explaining things in a way that you can share with your managers, so your managers can understand exactly what it is we're trying to achieve. And so thumbs up from me. I'm glad you're enjoying it. And I know that some of you have contacted me about supporting your products directly now based on what you've seen on YouTube. So thank you for that. So today I'm going to look at the question of data reuse. And one of the common misconceptions is, S1000D is all about data reuse, and that's not true. And I'm going to talk about where it's strong and where it actually fails. And, again, out of the box here, let's say that, S1000D didn't invent this. We've been doing data reuse in lots of different ways when it comes to data creation. I've got some software. Some of you have asked to see more software, so I'm going to show you a little bit of software today. We have this concept of data reuse in lots of different tools, whether they're supporting specifications or they're supporting different ways of producing data. Those of you who are familiar with web development or software programming, we have this concept of snippet reuse, and we create snippets and libraries of snippets that we can pull in information. This is not something that S1000D has thought was a great idea and invented. What they've done is thought, actually, it's a great idea, let's bring it into the specification, and that's what's happened. So we're going to be answering the question of data reuse here, and your specific question was around how, can you give a common component technical publication in the form of S1000D data modules? Can you give those to differing customers? And that's where I'm going to come to this. Again, if I'm talking about a specific or if I'm using images or something that represents a platform, it's because we've had those redrawn for our training courses, or it's images that I've made. So if there is any resemblance to your product, your project, it's purely coincidental. I am not saying that these platforms are doing this. I'm just using them to spruce up the slides and make them a little bit more tasty for you to follow along, which some of you seem to like. So the question itself actually asked a lot in a very small paragraph. Now, I have removed some of the content of your question because you did name some organizations, which I didn't want to do. And so your question specifically is, essentially you're saying one of the unique selling points was data reuse within S1000D. And could you tell us how we can still get the same common data module to go to various customers? And we are going to look at that question very shortly, and I'm going to break it down a little bit because I think it's important that we understand the problems that S1000D is trying to solve, and then we have the practical problems of having multiple customers, which is something that, as we get deeper into the information supply chain, becomes a real challenge for us. And if I am giving you my thoughts, this is because I see this in the market. I'm supporting customers right now who have these challenges. And again, but I'm going to have no names, no patro. I'm not going to talk about who they are. So S1000D is very strong at the project level. So we're going to talk about what that means and how that actually works very shortly. But just for those of us who do not know what we're talking about, we have this modular concept of our technical publications. So if we're trying to get away from our traditional technical publication, and which is produced in a monolithic fashion, which is sometimes I have to explain what I mean by monolithic, is that on these slides here, or this on the manual that's on the shelf behind me here, is that you can see that the technical publication that the tank is actually sat on here it's something that would have been written cover to cover. So what I mean in the old days is that the technical author or the technical publications team would have sat and written that manual all the way through from cover to cover. Now what we've realized is that actually that's not an efficient way to create our content, because there's lots of commonality through areas of our technical publication. So we have this modular concept in breaking down our technical publications, and what we can do is identify components of a technical publication, and then we can bring it back together to create our technical publication. So we can actually take the components of the bound manual there on the shelf, and we can then bring it back together to create something that represents what our user actually wants to see and wants to use. And I'm going to talk over the next coming weeks about publishing S1000D data and why it's not as simple as just putting together a publication module and publishing it, because we have to think about the usability of the data. And so what we're trying to do, this in its actual essence is kind of fundamentally data reuse. Okay, we can reuse the textual content here, parts information here, wherever we like at any point within this manual. So in theory, we are doing this write once, use many, which gets thrown around an awful lot. And here we also have illustrations that may appear in multiple places throughout the technical manual, but we can create it once and reuse it wherever we like across a technical manual, a suite of technical manuals, or wherever we want to actually publish it. Is that how it works in practice with technical illustrations? Not really. We are seeing that we have a common library of technical illustrations, and then the technical author's writing, and they'll say, actually, that's not quite what I need. Dear technical illustrator, can you please make some slight changes? Can you give me a slight different view of this illustration? That's the reality. The actual reality is, as well as today, is that most technical authors are now also technical illustrators, and that's a tutorial that we're going to come on to over the next coming weeks. So in its essence, and breaking it down into its fundamentals, this is what we talk about when it comes to modular data. And on my Understanding XML and S1000D course, we go into much more detail what we mean here, but please just trust me at this stage. So when we talk about S1000D, S1000D has that modular concept, but it also has this concept of tying information to a platform, or to what is known as a model identification code. So what we're doing is we're breaking down our information into those component parts, and we are identifying those to a particular platform or a variant of platform, or however we decide that we want to break our project down. So here, for simplicity, I have just said that I've got one main platform here which has a couple of variants, but for the simplicity of this project we're using model identification codes to differentiate between them. Now we could easily in an S1000D project reuse content across each of these variants that's common, and create content that's specific to a variant for those particular output requirements. Yes, I know there are other ways that we can do that in S1000D. We can use applicability, we can use system difference codes, we can do lots of different things. I'm keeping it simple for our YouTube channel, just breaking down this question that came in. So we have all of these XML documents that are, or these XML fragments, or these XML data modules that are all supporting our platform. And our platform is surrounded by all of this content that is, if we think about the DMRL, for example, that we have to define when we are creating or defining what we want for our project, these things can run into the thousands. I mean, I'm talking the many thousands of modules that we have to create to support our platform. And so we'd still have to have a methodology for how to bring them all together, which I'm going to come on to very shortly. But S1000D itself says that we have a couple of different methodologies when it comes to producing our technical content. So how we can write our data modules. So we have something called what is known as self-contained, and we also have something what is known as the common information repository based. And we have all of these CIRs that are, and again on my training courses we would go much deeper into each of these and how they work and look at some of the XML structures behind them. But what that means is that the self-contained is essentially going back to the old monolithic method of how we author, is that we can we take our data module and we write everything in it. So all the warnings, the cautions, we put all of the procedural information that's in there. Of course, we can still reference out to other data modules and we can bring in illustrations. But essentially, if we're putting parts information in, if we're putting zone information in, circuit breaker information in, warnings and cautions, tools, we are authoring that in and it lives inside that data module. Now, the other methodology is we have something known as common information repository based authoring. And what that means is we are providing essentially a bunch of libraries that the author can call information from. Top tip: not all software tools support this. So if you are looking at using the CIRs, then you need to ensure that your software can actually use it. But what this means is that we can actually break down common information and reuse it in a much more powerful way. And what that means is essentially those of you who are coming from other authoring environments, like here I've got a software tool that I won't name it, but you might be able to figure it out. Here you can see we have the ability to have things like micro content, and we have the ability to have things like snippets. This is exactly the kind of stuff that we're talking about here. And if you are coming from a programming perspective, this is not a principle that's new to you. You've been doing this for a very long time. So you are seeing now in the mainstream technical publications creation areas, these kind of concepts of snippets and micro content, and how this can all weave together to give us that functional output, but gives us an ability to reuse content, repurpose content, and manage it in central locations like the CIRs, that we can then give our authors the most current and up-to-date information from a central repository. Now, on my training courses, we'll have a philosophical discussion about these. Who thinks they're a good idea? Who thinks they're a bad idea? You've got some people that will absolutely say, we will never take your common information repositories. You can take them and, we will never use them. And those that absolutely love them. It comes down to a project decision on how and if you are going to use these. And but on my training courses, we would actually go through these. Now, of course, we have the choice how we're going to do this. But just to throw in a little bit of a curveball, even if your project is not planning on using the CIRs, it's actually good practice for the authoring team to have a set of libraries to call information from. And different software tools will work with these libraries in different ways. And how we actually copy those snippets or those XML fragments or whatever into our data modules is another area that we cover on my training courses, because you have to think about the implications of, if I want to reference a warning, for example, and that's only referenced into my data module, very similar to like the content references that you might have heard in other specifications, is that then if that warning changes, do we automatically update data modules? And that then generates a whole raft of debate and discussion. So we have the formal way and we have the informal way here of how we can work with the CIRs. Now, we won't go through it today, but the CIRs can also then integrate with other databases, and we can take content from other areas of our product support domain, which can populate the content of our CIRs. Now, of course, I think personally the role of the CIRs is going to change and evolve a lot over the coming years, especially as the S series of specifications are going to become more mature, and you're going to see software tools that are going to populate all of these CIRs or some of these CIRs from other databases. You're going to see that happen more and more, and some of this is actually happening right now in terms of how you can populate CIRs from external systems, but we are not going to talk about that today, because we would definitely go through that much more on my training courses. But in S1000D, if we are going to use the CIRs, we have to make a number of decisions around how we are going to use the CIRs, and trying to get under 20 minutes on YouTube, that's not going to happen today. But we have just released an S1000D business rules course, so if you're interested in that, get in touch with us. We look at the role of business rules, what is the BR doc, how do we structure the BR doc, and how do we link all of these things to a Brex data module, and how do we use software to enforce all of these. We look at severity, priority, linking, references, all of these kind of wonderful things. So, but for today, the CIRs, S1000D, this is issue 4.2 I'm using. I know somebody said, could you tell us which versions of the S1000D specs? This is issue 4.2. It tells us that we should be doing. So when we come to publishing our S1000D content, this is obviously, we're now trying to get back out to what our end user wants to see and the stuff that they're really interested in, not all of the back end stuff that we're interested in from a technical publications or a product support perspective. So what we're going to do now is look at the publishing data reuse elements that are supported within S1000D. So we have, I'm not going to go through the publication modules in structure because I don't have time today, but if you want to learn more about the publication modules, there's stuff on our YouTube channel and there's more stuff on our TDW Plus portal. So we have the concept of customers here that might be using a common platform. And, this could also be output requirements or whatever we want it to be. And we have all of that supporting XML data and imagery and all of this kind of stuff. And we have our desire to get out to our required outputs. So here I've got an IETP output, and I've also got the traditional print look and feel that we're trying to get out to here as well. And what we want to do is we want to be able to call from the database via something called the S1000D publication modules, the ability to publish out to lots of different output requirements for our desired customer requirements in terms of how they're going to get their technical publications. I think that made sense. But essentially we can call from that common source lots of different structures that we can then publish out for our customers based on exactly what they need. So there's another example of data reuse within S1000D. How do we create these modules? How do we then bring them back together to create this output that our customers want? I know that I kind of made a mash of that just now, but I hope that makes sense. So this is another example of data reuse. So Mike, this is all fantastic. So what is the problem? Well, there is a problem. And the problem is if we actually go deeper into the supply chain, and we have this S1000D does cause a problem for the supply chain. And just to kind of summarize what we've said on the last few slides, we have all of this XML data modules and structures that are supporting our platform. all tied to the product in terms of the model identification codes, which versions and issues of S1000D we're using, what are those particular business rules that we need to support, and any specific customer needs. Now, this is fine, and that works well when we're looking at products in isolation, but when we're deeper in the supply chain, of course, it doesn't work so smoothly. So if we imagine we are a communications system manufacturer and supplier, and again, I have made this up. It is not any particular product or project. I'm just using this for illustrative purposes. And imagine we are creating components of a communication system, and we have different customers that are using different elements or all of our particular communication system. So here you can see that we have our communication system in this particular made up example. It can be installed on 2 different customer products, and they work like that, commercial off the shelf. And and somebody mentioned to me as well, this could be a civil customer and a military customer. Of course, we have the product goes to somebody who's working in the military environment, somebody who's working in the civil environment. And the problem is, of course, is that both of these platforms generally will have their own requirements when it comes to a technical publications deliverable. So whether that is they're using different model identification codes, they're using different business rules, they have their own requirements around the technical publication. Some of them want it translated, some of them don't want it translated. Some of them want it in English US, some of them want it in English, British English, some of them want it in simplified technical English. This causes a problem for us when we are deeper in the supply chain. And essentially what we end up doing is we end up managing multiple data sets to support specific customers. And so therefore, whilst we're trying to leverage I've used the leverage word, and I'm sorry, I apologize, it causes offense to somebody. But if we are really trying to maximize this whole content reuse around our products, at the higher level, at the end product level, it works exceptionally well. And when we work within the product, so there I've used my helicopter and my tank. If we're focused insular, then it works exceptionally well, and it can be very, very powerful, and it can actually deliver tremendous amounts of production in terms of technical publications production, benefit and value, and it can also give us that flexibility when it comes to publishing and deploying our data. The problem comes when you are deeper in the supply chain, and if I've got my black box is fitted to this vehicle, my black box is fitted to this workstation, or my black box is fitted to a particular tank, and my customers all have their own specific requirements around technical publications. Because in the old days, in the old monolithic days, it was here is your technical publication supporting the product, and away you go. You accept the technical publication as it came. Today, it's much more sophisticated than that, and we have to put technical publication requirements down into the supply chain. So it's a consequence of using things like modular data. It's a consequence of using things like S1000D, which then has these... My daughter talks about the butterfly effect. We've been having lots of philosophical discussions about historical butterfly effect. If something changed in history, how would it be today, do we think? So, but we have that butterfly effect, right? We think it's easy. We just say we're going to have S1000D, great. But if I am in the supply chain, it does cause me some trouble. So I hope that makes sense. And I think I'm a little bit over my 20 minutes that I set myself as a limit. But we do have the ability to create very powerful methods for producing our technical content, whether we are just using modular content or whether we are using this CIR snippet kind of approach to our technical documentation production. So I hope that makes sense, and do continue to send in your questions and your thoughts around what it is that the benefits that you think exist, and and I'll give you some of the reality that's going on out in the market as well. So that's this week, ladies and gents. Thumbs up if you like, thumbs down if you don't. Send in your comments if you are disagreeing with what I say. If this resonates with you, do get in touch. Not sure I think I'm talking about IETPs next week. I've been asked a question around the different types of IETPs that are out there, and we're going to call into question the value of the S1000D IETP functionality matrix. So until next week, I'll see you on the other side. Stay safe.